Hey, what's up? Is Dungeons and Dragons the greatest role playing game? Is it the greatest role playing game of the fantasy genre? Or have they improved on it? Dungeons and Dragons came out a really long time ago, all the way back around the 70s. In the 80s, though, they boomed. I mean, there were like cartoons based on Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody was playing Dungeons and Dragons. And there were other games that were coming out that were like D&D, but they were in different genres or different games that they created. Like there's one game that was called Rollmaster, which I've never actually played, but I've talked to people who have played it or have some experience with it. And literally, like, as complicated as D&D is, and it is complicated, it takes like 3 hours just to roll up a character before you even start an adventure. Rollmaster was like, you roll to see if you hit, then you roll to see where you hit, then you roll to see like what kind of damage you did, and it's very, very specific. And I can't think of like a battle taking an hour just for one encounter, just for one random encounter inside your D&D adventure, to take an hour just to figure out like who beat who. I think it's just a little bit too much. But what they did with D&D, what they did with Dungeons and Dragons is they improved on it. They kept building on it. And if you look even today, like any other role-playing game, now I don't know every single role-playing game, but a lot of role-playing games, including video games that had RPG elements in it, are the same as Dungeons and Dragons. You roll up your stats, you roll up your strength and your charisma and your intelligence and whatever it is. And then you choose a race, like are you an elf and are you a human? Are you a dwarf or, a halfling or whatever? And it's interesting, like some races are just like, they just go all out with these races, and they're just like one is like this like sentient walking cat race, right? In some video games, it's like that. And so then they started like making more and more. So back in the day, playing Dungeons and Dragons, we were playing that, and then we started to all of a sudden experiment, sort of like mess around with other role-playing games in the same genre or other genres, right? Never Rollmaster. It's just Rollmaster felt like, I think it felt like too much for everybody that I knew who was playing. We're just like, you don't need to know every little detail of your, adventure when you're just trying to have fun playing, right? It's not about every little detail. It's about just enjoying your time with your friends and playing a fun game, you know? But at one point, D&D was like the first game. It was like pretty much the only game. And you can you can go to Toys R Us and pick up a starter kit. You could pick up like, a simple manual. It'll tell you how to like roll up a character. It'll have like a module in it, so you have an adventure already there. And it kind of explains a little bit of how to be a dungeon master and how to once you have that module, whoever runs that module, whoever reads the module and figures out, what the adventure is and what it's about, and can lead other characters through the module, becomes the dungeon master. So it's not really that hard to be a DM. But I've seen in recent years that dungeon masters have become super like talented. I mean, there's like these channels. I think Critical Hit or something like that. There are these channels on YouTube that are like, I don't even know who this dungeon master is, because he's so good at what he does. Like he leads people through this exciting adventure. He's like the Blue's Clues, or like the Mr. Rogers of D&D. It's like he really, like, he's like a professional actor, who knows how to be a professional dungeon master, which is crazy. And even like on those shows, like the kids that play, or the people, a lot of times they're celebrities. And a lot of times they're just people that you know from movies and stuff like that. And they're just playing some character or whatever it is. And they do sound effects and they make everything so like cool and interesting. This is not how you play D&D, right? This is not like everyone's typical adventure, But when you have Dungeons and Dragons, it's like you want to play other games. You want to play different genres. You want to play sci-fi. You want to play superheroes. You want to play spies, right? You want to play all those. And those are basically the kind, that we were playing like back in the day. Like we were just like, except the spies. Spies is something I never played, and I even got this. It basically was this book, like a booklet book, like a large book, which explains how to play a game called Danger International, which was a spy game. But I couldn't think of like, because I was like, basically had experience with Dungeons and Dragons or maybe sci-fi role-playing games or maybe even superhero role-playing games, right? But then it's like, well, how do you run a spy adventure? Like, you got to really maybe read a lot of spy books or like watch a lot of not just, James Bond, but the adventures would be similar to James Bond because you would roll up basically a hero instead of, an actual spy. You wouldn't play in an actual spy world because, like, actual spies probably not as glamorous as James Bond. I mean, the job is not as glamorous, and definitely like the actual person probably, James Bond is a superhero, super spy. He's a superhero spy. He's not like your regular spy, nothing like it, right? So there you go. But it would be cool to run a James Bond adventure, and I think with something like Danger International, you can base it on a James Bond novel, or base it on like you could take Goldfinger or something like that, or and just make that the adventure, and just change it around. But like now you kind of know what's going to happen, or just make it similar to that, or just make it inspired by it. You need a villain. You need someone who's trying to do something, maybe like smuggle. Like in video games, in spy video games, like someone's trying to smuggle like weapons or something like that, and you're trying to expose them, you're trying to like find out who they are and take them down, whatever. You work for this like secret agency that nobody knows about and stuff like that. So, secret agent, the adventure, right? So it's still kind of a mystery. I've never actually played through that game. But the thing about D&D is that once you have D&D, you don't need anything else, because I think even like, of course, I haven't played every single like role-playing game that's out there, and I haven't played them in a while either, but they all kind of go back to the same thing that D&D started, the D&D like had, which is like your stats, your race, your class. Are you a warrior? Are you like a magic user? And so even like in a science fiction adventure, it was the same thing. It's like, are you a human? Are you an alien, right? What kind of alien are you if you are? And they might have different races where you could be different aliens. There was one thing in Space Opera, which was one of the games that I played, which was like, you could be a transhuman. Transhuman, which is like, you're human, but you're not. You're kind of like more, you have higher stats. I think your strength is higher, your intelligence is higher. You're just this like alien person from another planet, but you're human-like enough that they use the word transhuman. It's sort of like those people in science fiction movies that are not quite human. They look human, and they're a little bit maybe even more powerful or like superior to humans, but they're not human. So you could play as a human, you could play as a not human that's human-like, or you could play like as some weird alien and whatever and go on an adventure with that. So that was kind of cool. Then they had like something with Marvel had a role-playing game, and I think DC also had a role-playing game, and they were pretty much the same. And what I think about role-playing games is a lot of people like made up their own role-playing game, right? I've heard of people who make their own role-playing games, right? So, I mean, it's one thing to make your own module and make your own adventure. That stuff is cool. Or even like expand on the existing game as it is. There was a magazine called Dungeon. There was also a magazine called White Dwarf, I do believe, that was kind of similar to Dungeon or whatever. But there was a magazine called Dungeon, and it had a really great like D&D art and fantasy art in it. And all of the people that drew for the D&D books and the modules and all that, all the illustrations they did, they had that in those magazines, and you would have like extra spells for magic users or illusionists or whatever. You would have extra like different classes. You can be barbarian, you can be a witch, you can do all kinds of different things. Like they took like the magic user, which was just your blanket term for you're a character who uses magic and doesn't really use weapons. Not as much. You kind of use weapons a little bit, but your strength is magic. So it would kind of like have that. But the thing is that like it was just too general. It's like, well, what kind of magic do you use? Let's just say are you a fire magic? Do you use like fire magic, or do you use like, are you a necromancer, or are you, what is it? Because they changed. They had magic user and illusionist, but the thing is about those like magic users and illusionists is at low levels they were really really weak. They couldn't do anything. I mean, what is the point of being a first level magic user and only having one spell that they can only use once per day or something like that? It's just that's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous because like a warrior can use a sword, and do more damage than that spell can do for the magic user, and he could use that sword all day long, And then if you look at something like the illusionist, that's even like worse because like you maybe had a light spell where you can like turn on a light in a dungeon, and that was your only spell. And so that was kind of like the downside. There was a lot of things that were kind of like they didn't make sense with Dungeons and Dragons. However, high level characters were always good. It doesn't matter. You could be, if you're a high level illusionist, you're pretty badass and powerful. You could do a lot of, you can create illusions to really like, basically like confuse your enemy or destroy your enemy and whatever, or be part of a party where there are certain people that have certain strengths and they can do certain things. The thing about it is that like a warrior, maybe a magic user can go alone and take on a lot of the monsters that you find when you go through a module. But a thief really can't. I mean, you could, but you kind of have to sneak around all the time and maybe like backstab or something like that to do any attack. But then you would have this one backstab attack they can only do once. And then the monster, like, still alive, and it then turns around and sees you, and that's the end of that thief, right? So a thief is good if you have like a well-rounded party. Now the thief can open doors, can track, can hide, can go and scout around and do a lot of things that like a wizard or warrior can't. So he's like a sort of like, he works with others, but can't really work alone. But the thing is about it is they created this thing where now, like, even up to today, even though it started like way in the 70s, and I heard it even started earlier than that, like originally, I think role-playing games started as army games originally. And then they started making it like fantasy role-playing games. And then they started like sci-fi role-playing games. Now there are whole stores that, that sell role-playing games that are just like, they have every freaking role-playing game that you've never heard of before in every genre. There was even like an Elric of Melniboné role-playing game that I played, which was pretty cool. It was just a lot like D&D, except you can make demon swords. You basically find a demon or summon a demon and kind of put him into a sword, and your sword becomes a demon sword and it becomes more powerful and stuff like that. And now I think that D&D is a lot better because it's so advanced. It's expanded. You could pretty much be any character. And I think that like, if you really want to have a good adventure, you want to kind of like take what's there and just add to it and just make it, modify it to make it your own. You could pretty much have any race that you can think of from any story, in any book, in any movie at all, and put that into your game. You can have every genre of role-playing game. It doesn't matter what it is. It's going to be the same thing. Stats and what powers does the character have, and can the dungeon master or the game master run a good adventure in that genre? So it can be like, yes, it could be superheroes, but it could be a specific superhero. In a specific adventure. You could just do an adventure based on a movie. You could do an adventure based on like The Watchmen and be those heroes. You can be The Watchmen. You could be Rorschach, or you could be frickin' like Night Owl or something like that, or like Silk Spectre or the Comedian or whatever it is. You guys ever read the comic Watchmen? If you haven't read the comic Watchmen, read the comic Watchmen. If you want to watch the movie Watchmen, watch the movie Watchmen. It's pretty good too. It's not the same story though. It's a similar story, but half of it is different. They changed it. But it's really really good. But that's the thing about like role playing games. You can do anything. You could do like a James Bond adventure. You don't have to do it through Danger International. You could just do a James Bond adventure, and you could do it through Dungeons and Dragons stats, because you could change anything about it. What's we used to do is really really cool, that like basically never start at low levels. Like sometimes we'd run an adventure where we would start at low levels, but there was just some silly adventure. Like basically, when you're at a low level, you can get killed by just a random wandering, cat, like monster. Not even a monster. Like it's just like a wild animal or something like that. You can't even take down a wild animal, with like being first level anything, especially with a wizard who's just got a dagger and a staff. At least at least a warrior has like a sword and armor and could go against some kind of monster, like some kind of freaking enemy, whatever it is, but low level other characters just can't. And so you could kind of do any genre, any adventure based on anything. Like if any movie you can think of in that world, you can do an adventure for it. Like The Matrix. You could do an adventure in The Matrix. I think that would be cool because The Matrix kind of like set you up to do an adventure in that world. Like you can do an Avatar adventure. You can do an adventure based on Total Recall, right? That kind of adventure. You can do a adventure based on like any sci-fi movie, any fantasy movie. Right, you could do like sort of a, the movie Excalibur. You can do that kind of adventure where you're a knight in the round table, the knights of the round table, and whatever it is, and you're going after the Grail. You're trying to find it, and you're going on an adventure to find this Grail. And you take the evil people that were in that story, and they try to stop you, and then you fight with them, and you roll the dice to see if you win and stuff like that. So I think that would be cool. And that's the thing about it, is people realize that you don't have to just play D&D. You could play anything. I think that the fault of a game when they come out and they're like, hey, this is a new game, this is really cool, is the limitations of it. There was another game called that came out around when Dungeons and Dragons came out. I think it was done by the same people. And not Wizards of the Coast, because now they're Wizards of the Coast. Before they were like a different company. They were called a different company, but they did the same thing. And there was another kind of like a sci-fi adventure. And they came out with like a starter kit, and they came out with some books, and it looked like the starter kit for D&D. And so, but it was weird. Like, yes, you can be human and whatever, you can have a laser beam, but you're very like limited. You can only have like a laser pistol or a laser rifle. They didn't give you a lot of choices, and then they also didn't really come out with like a good module and stuff. They really didn't explain how to play that game. And then something like the Space Opera came out. And when Space Opera came out, my friend like had that, and they were like, "Oh, this is Space Opera. Let's play a space adventure." And it was kind of cool. You're on a spaceship, you're flying through space. It was the same adventure as like a D&D adventure, but it's just a different genre. And so what they did with D&D is like they just kept expanding on it, especially the magazine Dungeon Magazine, because they would just constantly, every time that magazine came out, I think they had adventures. They might have not had adventures, but they had new spells for existing characters, existing classes, different new classes, new races. They just expanded it so you can have more of a selection. People started playing a barbarian. You could have a Conan adventure with a barbarian character, right? And stuff like that. And so what we used to do is not even start at level 1. We had this book called Deities and Demigods, which was one of the big, hardcover books that came out with D&D. And Deities and Demigods was like, it just had all of these, like it had Cthulhu in it. It had Quetzalcoatl, from the Mayan or the Aztec gods. They had Egyptian gods. They had like Horus the Avenger. Now, I don't know why it was Horus the Avenger. Horus was an Egyptian god, but I don't actually remember him actually being an Avenger of any sort. He was, but in the book, he was Horus the Avenger. I thought Horus the Avenger was kind of cool, but I don't think it was accurate to who Horus really was in the Egyptian pantheon. But they had that, they had demons and shit. They had like the devil and different devils and Beelzebub and what was the other one? Yeah, that, like every single like name of every devil, they made it into different devils. You were able to like go on an adventure and fight them and stuff like that. So we would roll up characters of level 100. We literally would start with level 100 characters, and we would go after these deities and demigods because we were that powerful. We'd be like level 100, and our stats would be like really up. Instead of like rolling 3 dice to figure out what your stats are, we would roll like 8 dice, and then like 2s and 3s. Like anytime a 1, 2, and 3 were rolled, you get to re-roll that. So we re-roll it, and any low dice would just re-roll it until we had higher dice. And we wouldn't just roll 3 dice, we would roll a bunch of dice. And the 3 highest stats, that would be your stat. And then you don't have to just like randomly roll for each stat. We decide where we want to put it. So if you roll like a 20, which is the maximum, I think, roll in some of these games, you're able to take that and put that into whatever stat. Like if you wanted to be a warrior, you could put that in strength, or if you wanted to be a wizard, you could put that in intelligence or whatever. So at these high levels, the adventures became really fun and really interesting. We just went ahead and tweaked it and changed it and made it our own thing. We changed it around. We made it what we wanted to make it. We wanted to play as powerful characters. Like, why would you want to play as a level 1 character? It's like the goal of starting as a level 1 character is to eventually become these high level characters. Even when you're playing a video game, when you're playing low level characters, you can hardly take on any monster, right? You have to level up your character before the adventure really begins, before you can take on not only a random monster, but the actual villain that's trying to come after you, right? There's just no way you can do that until you level up in a lot of these games. So that's the thing about it, is that we just would start at high levels. And we would, like in D&D, you would have, not in the original D&D, but later on in later editions of the D&D, you would also have psionics. Psionics was great because it was these psionic powers, basically psychic powers, these psionics where people can do like, like mental blasts and shit, like scanners and whatever. Like, they could pretty much, do a power word kill on someone, which would basically just use the word, just say the word kill, and I think they say the word die or something like that. And if they don't roll their saving throw and survive that attack, they will just drop and die. Like only really, really powerful like characters in movies can do that. And once you get like to that kind of power, your enemies become super powerful. If you look at the story, like in Elric of Melniboné, if you ever read that story, read the story Elric of Melniboné by Michael Moorcock. It's a great story. It's sword and sorcery, and it's fun. If you like sword and sorcery, you probably will like the story. A lot of people like it. Like he was basically like a super powerful character. Not really because he was really powerful. He just had a super powerful sword. And that sword he can use to attack and and kill hordes of monsters and really, really powerful like wizards. He did have a god that he could call upon, a deity, Ariok, that he would call, and sometimes the deity would help him and sometimes he wouldn't. And he did have magical powers. Like he had this, he was a king, an emperor of Melniboné, and he had these old powers that were like given to him because he was emperor and whatever it was. And so he had that, but he went against really powerful characters. I mean, it's not really that much fun, when your enemy is just like a wolf and you're like like a first level character and trying to beat a wolf. If you think about it, when you play a video game and they send a wolf for you to beat a freaking wolf because your first level is like, that's not the fun part of the game. The fun part is beating the freaking monster boss that's like super powerful. And in order to do that, you got to really, really level up. You got to really, really level up your stats and get the weapons you need to actually defeat that, right? So we were doing that, and that was like super, super fun. But I think also, in the end, I think that the thing is, it's like, yes, you want to kind of like play a role-playing system that works really, really well. And I think D&D works well. And I think D&D can work well with any genre. You just change it up a little bit, but the basic things are there. Roll to see if you hit, roll for initiative, roll to see if you, whatever, right? You roll to see if you get hit. If you jump or something out of the way, and, you roll to see if you did that, right? So it makes kind of sense that way, and so And so that's the thing about it, is that like it's really up to the creativity and the imagination of the people that are playing the game, right? If you read a lot of that genre kind of stories, if you read a lot of fantasy stories, you probably will play a really good fantasy game when you get together with other people that also read fantasy stories. If you read sci-fi, whatever, you can run a sci-fi adventure because you're very familiar with sci-fi. You can do any genre or any story you want with pretty much any system, and especially D&D. You can use D&D, expand it, change it, and create it to run any kind of story from any movie, any book, or any genre, or even just a story that someone just comes out of their imagination, you know? So thanks guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you're thinking about it in the comments, and give it a like and a subscribe if you want, and I will see you guys in another video later. Take care.